Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy the story. Remember to like and subscribe. And now the story.
The day began like any other. I woke up groggy, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me like an anvil. My wife, Belinda, was visiting her sister, leaving me alone to contend with the chaos of my work life. I stumbled out of bed, my body protesting every movement after 30 hours of relentless duty. As a police detective, my job came with its share of perks. One such benefit was an unmarked police car, equipped with hidden flashing lights, a siren, and a powerful motor. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. The previous day, someone had carelessly backed into my vehicle in the police parking lot, rendering it unusable until repairs could be made. In its place, they provided me with a loaner car, an eyesore of fluorescent green that seemed to mock me with its garishness. Despite my exhaustion, duty called. Between undercover surveillance, finalizing arrests, and drowning in paperwork, I had barely found time to breathe. When I finally returned home, I collapsed into bed without a second thought. The next morning, I awoke to a rude awakening. A notice was taped to my door, and to my disbelief, the hideous loaner car was nowhere to be seen. The Homeowners Association had towed it away, citing some obscure regulation about vehicle registration. Fury surged within me as I stormed down to the HOA office, ready to unleash my wrath upon whoever was responsible. The HOA president greeted me with a smug smile, clearly relishing the opportunity to exercise his authority. "You towed my car, and you're going to have them return it now," I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. The president's response was dismissive. "No, Carl. It was a legal tow. Only registered vehicles are allowed in this community." I saw red. That rule doesn't exist in the HOA's regulations. You're either making it up or misinterpreting an existing rule. Return my car immediately. But the president remained obstinate, his demeanor bordering on arrogance. "I have every right to enforce parking regulations. And you, Carl, have blatantly disregarded them." I bit back a retort, feeling the weight of injustice crushing down on me. But I was not one to back down from a fight. Pulling out my phone, I discreetly began recording the conversation, knowing it might come in handy later. As I threatened to involve law enforcement, the president's facade crumbled. Panic flickered in his eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. "You can't do that. I have rights." With a sense of satisfaction, I made the call. Within minutes, officers arrived at the scene, handcuffs clinking ominously as they closed around the president's wrists. Justice, it seemed, was finally catching up with him. The subsequent investigation revealed a web of corruption that ran deep within the HOA. The towing company had been providing kickbacks directly to the president, and my case was just the tip of the iceberg. 22 other victims emerged, each with their own tale of extortion and deceit. As the truth came to light, the president's empire crumbled around him. He was stripped of his power, his once untouchable authority reduced to ashes. Behind bars, he would face the consequences of his actions, while the victims he had exploited found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served.
In the heart of Crestwood Estates, a picturesque suburban neighborhood nestled beneath a canopy of oak trees, an insidious force lurked beneath the surface of its idyllic streets, the Homeowners Association. For years, the HOA had held sway over the community, enforcing regulations with an iron fist, much to the chagrin of the residents. However, their latest decree struck a nerve that ignited a revolution. It began innocuously enough with a notice slipped under every door in Crestwood Estates. The crisp white paper bore the emblem of the HOA, its authority unquestioned by most. The decree was simple yet contentious: Halloween was banned. The rationale behind the decision was laid out in bureaucratic language, citing concerns over safety, decorum, and property values. Totally disgusting, they called it, claiming that children running around begging for candy reflected poorly on the neighborhood. But to the residents of Crestwood Estates, the decree was nothing short of an assault on tradition and community spirit. Halloween had always been a cherished occasion, where children roamed the streets in costumes, laughter echoed through the night, and neighbors came together to share in the joy of the season. To have such a beloved tradition stripped away by the whims of a faceless organization was unthinkable. Anger simmered beneath the surface as Halloween approached. Despite the ban, some defiant souls adorned their homes with pumpkins, cobwebs, and skeletons, refusing to let the spirit of the season be extinguished. But their acts of rebellion did not go unpunished. On the morning of November 1st, the residents awoke to find fines affixed to their doors, each one bearing the signature of the HOA president. It seemed that the enforcers of conformity would not tolerate any dissent, no matter how small. Outrage swept through Crestwood Estates like wildfire, uniting neighbors in a shared sense of injustice. Determined to challenge the tyranny of the HOA, the residents mobilized. Flyers were distributed, meetings were held in living rooms and community centers, and alliances were forged among neighbors who had previously only exchanged polite nods in passing. The date of reckoning was set, November 15th, the day of the HOA's next meeting. As the sun dipped below the horizon on that fateful evening, the community center buzzed with anticipation. Residents packed the hall to capacity, their faces a mixture of resolve and defiance. The air crackled with electricity as the members of the HOA board took their seats at the front of the room, oblivious to the storm that was about to descend upon them. The meeting began with the usual formalities. Minutes were read, reports were delivered, and motions were proposed. But when the floor was opened to comments from the residents, the dam burst, unleashing a torrent of pent-up frustration and anger. One by one, residents took to the microphone, their voices trembling with emotion as they spoke of the injustice they had endured at the hands of the HOA. They spoke of their love for Halloween, of the memories it had created for their families, and of the sheer absurdity of being fined for celebrating a beloved tradition. The board members squirmed in their seats, their expressions shifting from arrogance to discomfort as they realized the depth of the community's anger. But it was too late to quell the uprising that had been ignited in Crestwood Estates. When the time came to vote on the fate of the HOA board, the outcome was never in doubt. In a landslide victory, the board members were ousted from their positions, their reign of tyranny brought to an abrupt and decisive end. But the residents of Crestwood Estates were not content to simply replace one set of tyrants with another. With newfound unity and determination, they elected a new slate of board members, individuals who shared their values and their vision for a community governed by fairness and inclusivity. Under the leadership of the new board, the fines imposed by the old regime were swiftly overturned, and Halloween was reinstated as an officially sanctioned holiday in Crestwood Estates. But the victory was bittersweet, for the specter of the HOA still loomed large over the neighborhood, its power unchecked and its authority unquestioned. In the days and weeks that followed, discussions raged among the residents of Crestwood Estates about the future of the HOA. Some advocated for reform, believing that the organization could be salvaged with the right leadership and oversight. Others called for its outright abolition, arguing that the time had come to reclaim their neighborhood from the clutches of bureaucratic tyranny. As the debate raged on, one thing became abundantly clear: the residents of Crestwood Estates would not rest until they had taken back control of their community. Whether through reform or revolution, they were determined to ensure that the HOA would never again wield unchecked power over their lives and their homes. With hearts united and spirits unbroken, they marched forward into an uncertain future, guided by the belief that together they could overcome any obstacle that stood in their way.
In the quaint suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, where neatly trimmed lawns and perfectly manicured gardens were the pride of its residents, there existed a peculiar governing body known as the Homeowners Association. Led by a group of individuals who prided themselves on maintaining order and uniformity, the HOA had long established rules to preserve the pristine appearance of the community. However, none of their previous regulations had garnered as much controversy as the latest decree. Only white and yellow flowers were permitted in front yards. The announcement rippled through the neighborhood like a sudden gust of wind, leaving residents bewildered and outraged. For many, gardening was not merely a hobby but a form of self-expression, a way to inject color and vibrancy into their lives. To restrict their choice of flora to two bland hues felt like an assault on their creativity and individuality. Among those most affected was Margaret Reynolds, a retired botanist whose love for exotic blooms knew no bounds. Her front yard resembled a kaleidoscope of colors, with flowers from all corners of the world dancing in the sunlight. Peonies, dahlias, and orchids intertwined in a riot of hues, creating a spectacle that drew admiration from passers-by. As Margaret read the new regulation, a frown creased her brow. How could they dictate what she could plant in her own garden? Determined to challenge the decree, she rallied her neighbors for a meeting at the community center. The gathering buzzed with tension as residents poured in, each carrying their own grievances and fears. Margaret took the floor, her voice steady but laced with indignation. Friends, neighbors, this is not just about flowers. It's about our right to express ourselves, to beautify our homes in a way that reflects our personalities. We cannot allow the HOA to stifle our creativity and impose such arbitrary restrictions. Her impassioned speech struck a chord with the crowd, igniting a fervor of defiance. One by one, residents stood up to share their stories of botanical rebellion. Some recounted childhood memories of planting wildflower meadows with their parents, while others spoke of the therapeutic benefits of gardening. As the meeting progressed, alliances formed and strategies were devised. Margaret proposed a petition to overturn the Homeowners Association's decision, while others suggested guerrilla gardening tactics, covertly planting forbidden flowers under the cover of night. Despite their determination, the road ahead was fraught with challenges. The HOA wielded considerable power, and dissenters risked fines and legal repercussions. Undeterred, Margaret and her allies embarked on a campaign to sway public opinion, plastering the neighborhood with flyers and organizing protest marches. Their efforts did not go unnoticed. The local news picked up the story, sparking a debate that reverberated far beyond Willow Creek. Supporters flooded social media with messages of solidarity, while critics dismissed the controversy as trivial. Meanwhile, tensions within the neighborhood reached a boiling point. Proponents of the HOA's decree argued that uniformity was essential to maintaining property values and preserving the neighborhood's aesthetic appeal. They accused Margaret and her allies of selfishness, prioritizing their personal whims over the greater good. Amidst the heated exchanges, a glimmer of hope emerged. A prominent civil rights lawyer offered pro bono representation to challenge the legality of the HOA's regulation, citing infringement on personal liberties. Emboldened by this development, Margaret and her fellow activists redoubled their efforts, gathering signatures and rallying support for their cause. As the legal battle unfolded, the community found itself at a crossroads. Neighbors who had once exchanged pleasantries now found themselves on opposing sides of a divisive issue. Friendships were strained, and rifts deepened as the debate grew increasingly polarized. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. Margaret and her allies stood before the HOA board, their faces set in determined expressions. The lawyer presented their case with eloquence and conviction, arguing that the regulation violated constitutional rights to freedom of expression and property ownership. After hours of deliberation, the board rendered its verdict. In a surprising twist, they announced a compromise. While the restriction on flower colors would remain in place, residents would be allowed to apply for exemptions on a case-by-case basis, subject to approval by a newly formed Garden Aesthetics Committee. The decision sparked mixed reactions within the community. Some saw it as a victory for individual rights, while others viewed it as a hollow concession designed to appease both sides. Margaret, however, remained undeterred. Though the battle may have been won, the war for botanical freedom raged on, and the HOA board was becoming wary and started to fear about losing their positions. In the end, the controversy served as a catalyst for change, igniting conversations about rights, community engagement, and the balance between conformity and individuality. As the seasons changed and flowers bloomed once more in the front yards of Willow Creek, one thing was certain: the petals of protest had left an indelible mark on the landscape of their neighborhood, reminding residents that the true beauty of a community lies in its diversity and resilience.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.